Hello, and welcome to another episode of Dungeons and Wellness. We are so happy to be back. It's been a little while, but here we are, ready for another wonderful clarity episode. And, if we're having a clarity episode, then we definitely need our resident professional psychologist and therapist extraordinaire, Kim.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Kim. Ooh, hype. I'm just so happy to see you.
I'm happy to see you too.
Yay! Yeah, it has been so long. I'm so glad to be back and getting the ball rolling again and bringing more clarity and insight into people's lives.
That's right.
That's
So
right.
Today.
All right. So today we have a few different clips. We had a very interesting last play session where Rand and Caesar saw a lot. A lot happened, very dramatic, and I'm so excited to hear your take about some of these things that went down. Because you're out there, you're in the field, you're working with people who go through all types of things,
Yes.
and I'm curious to know what you'll think. So,
Okay, let's go.
Without further ado, can we please get clip number 1? Like I said, you're now part of the Mercy Arcana. One of the things that you need to know is the Mercy Arcana salute. So, boys, this is what you do. Take your left hand and put it to your right elbow. Take your right hand. Oh, this is not my elbow. This is my shoulder.
I was gonna say,
Hey, that's funny. I went to my shoulder because that's what you were doing, but that's not what you said. And I heard you say that. I didn't even think about it. That's wild. Okay.
Oh, God. Head,
Rand's
shoulders,
just a
knees, and
farmer
toes.
anyway, like hay foot, straw foot, hay foot.
Yeah, you haven't taken anatomy classes. You're just a farm boy. Okay, sorry.
That's where we learned the word elbow is anatomy classes.
Yeah, right.
Yes. Oh, God. Okay, so left hand to right elbow. Welcome back to Dungeons and Wellness. Okay. So that clip wasn't really so much about the actual story, but I thought it was super interesting just to see I was saying one thing like, oh, put your right hand. I feel like I'm gonna get it wrong again, but yeah, put your right hand to and I was just doing entirely the wrong thing. I was not doing what I was saying. And I thought it was so interesting to see Steve and Dru, they're like, okay, cool, let's do it. And for a second, nobody realized that what we were doing and what we were saying didn't match. I thought it was so interesting to see, or to kind of take this and think about our role as leaders versus followers. And how I don't know, maybe I'm getting too deep with this, right?
That's a little too deep. I was thinking that's just a behavior. Actions speak louder than words, right? Behavior is more indicative. We tend to follow behaviors more. We tend to trust behaviors more. So yeah, you may say one thing, but then if the behaviors is different, then this is a silly way of expressing that, but that's kind of the concept that's happening there.
Sure, yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Yes, thank you. I was going a little too ham with this right
Yeah,
off the bat.
Yeah.
but yeah, actions speak louder than words. I love that. And so when we are looking at somebody kind of saying one thing and doing another, we're more likely to follow what they do. This is just I feel like this is how we go through life. We look more at people's actions rather than their words.
Yeah.
And so I thought now this ties into, maybe I should have saved the leader follower thing for the next clip, where I thought an interesting little moment happened here in our second clip where we kind of think about how a society and our role in our culture kind of builds our worldview, things that we learn from people before us. So, can we get clip number 2? You can see everything else looks normal.
So I'll drop it and I'll say, look, I don't know anything about magic, but this is not natural.
So it looks like these fields in particular have been targeted with some sort of area of effect magic.
Maybe it's a curse.
Mm.
Being the superstitious town folk that I am.
Oh.
Maybe it's a witch's curse. There's some witches that are said to be living in the hills.
Hill witches.
I'm kind of turned off of the hill witches idea at this point. Like we just like your town is the equivalent of the hill witches to the people in this town, you know.
True.
So like I'm starting to think that.
Well, I'm just telling you tales by the fireside that we grew up telling each other about.
Yeah, no, totally for sure. Like I also remember the story about the hill witches, but I'm starting to reconsider that.
Okay, so here, I thought it was like interesting to see because this almost felt like another moment where it was like hand, elbow, shoulder, except this time it was more conceptual. And so like Steve was talking about, oh yeah, you know, the hill witches, we told tales by the fireside that we grew up telling each other. And he made an interesting point about how Rand is like this superstitious boy who just believes like all the stories that he's heard from other people. And he like doesn't question those stories about hill witches and other superstitions. And yeah, I guess I was wondering, you know, if you have any thoughts about how this plays into kind of our culture, our place in society, the things that we learn, ideas that are passed down from one generation to the next, or any other thoughts you might have.
So this has a lot to do with how we. Hold on. Hello.
Oh, the clarity!
Okay.
Wow.
This has a lot to do with how our automatic beliefs are formed, or how our core beliefs, I should say, how our core beliefs are formed. And usually we develop this in childhood, right? So this is actually how we conceptualize the world, right? So when as children we absorb everything around us, and we develop certain value systems and certain belief systems from that. And as you grow up, your beliefs get challenged, and it's a matter of, are you going to stay with your belief? Are you going to stay firm with it? Or are you going to experience what's called a cognitive shift? So that's I think what's happening with Dru's character in terms of, well, I'm starting to think that this is a little like you know, I don't know about that. So that's a shift, right, in perspective. Like, okay, when your beliefs are being challenged, do you get offended and go, no, my beliefs are right? Or do you learn? Do you change? Do you grow? And a lot of it has to do with your openness to change. Because with change comes discomfort, right? Like, it's really uncomfortable to change. So it explains Rand, actually, Steve's character, he's more comfortable with his beliefs, like keeping his beliefs, because it's what's, you know, it's what makes sense.
Right.
And then
with his worldview.
Yeah. And then with Dru's character, it's more like thinking more critically about it, like, wait a minute.
Yes, exactly. That's actually something that I really loved about that scene, where I felt like the Caesar, or Dru's character, was kind of showing how, you know, well, I see your black and white view of the hill witches, but perhaps we can approach this thought with a little more nuance, or like you said, like the critical thinking skills start to be applied. And I kind of love that interplay between the characters where Caesar was like, well, hold up, Rand, hold on. Like, maybe let's think about this a little differently.
Yeah.
And so, like, those cognitive shifts as they occur in ourselves, then we can also encourage the other people around us, our friends, whoever's close by, to join us in our growth.
There's also got to be a reason why we changed, right? Like, if we're comfortable where we're at and there's no reason why we have to change, why would we ever change? So there must be something in Dru's character that makes him believe that it's better to change. Like, there's something about it that doesn't sit well with him, as opposed to with Steve's character. There's no reason for him to change because.
Right, absolutely. And actually, that's such a cool concept. Like, I feel like that kind of ties in. I don't know if this is intentional or unintentional, but I feel like that ties in nicely with the character backstories. Like, Rand, his whole thing is that he's just a small town farm boy who's never seen anything basically outside of Daenerys and that one little area where he's from. But then Caesar, he's like more well-traveled at this point in his life. He's been to different types of places and met different types of people. I wonder if they did that. Almost definitely not on purpose, but that works out really nicely. Shout out to Steve and Dru. Killing it out here, adventuring. Okay, so cool. Well, we have more clips. And later on in the episode, like, we started out silly, it starts to get pretty serious. So next one, let's go. Clip 3A. Come back to the marketplace.
I'll whisper to Caesar. I think you could do a better job of explaining this than me.
Gotcha. Basant, it is lovely to see you as always, but we come with some somewhat concerning news about your lovely son, whom we hold in high respect. We were over there in the field fighting some twig blights, and after we finished slaying them, we looked over and we were very surprised to see a group of children holding burlap sacks full of food, and your lovely son was among them. Now, I was as shocked as you are. I was like, how can this be? And just a few minutes ago, I came to the tentative conclusion that the grasshoppers that your son so loves to eat have been causing him to, or kind of controlling his actions. I don't think that your son is doing this. I think that somebody is corrupting your son as a vessel to do this for some grander cause. So I know that's a lot to drop on you, but we wanted to make sure that we let you know as soon as possible.
I'll say you should listen to him. He's an elf after all.
I know some things. I want to say if the grasshopper thing is just a theory. If that ends up not being true, I don't lose any points. That's just a theory I'm having. I'm not putting any money on it. I'm just saying that's my current theory because I don't think that your son would do this willingly.
Okay, so I guess Dru gave a lot of context there in that explanation, but basically they were telling a dad that they saw his son stealing food. And I thought this was a really cool opportunity to talk about like the skill of delivering bad news, or just like conveying information that you know the other person is not going to want to hear, but it's important and you need to say it. And I feel like this is a skill that like certain, like for example, medical health practitioners are trained in this, like doctors, nurses, and they receive specific training in how to deliver bad news or sad news to a family. But yeah, I guess I would love to hear your thoughts, you know, coming from the background that you have as like a clinical psychologist.
Caesar's an elf, right?
Yes.
And Rand is human?
Mhm.
What's Caesar's occupation?
So Caesar is a younger guy, actually not that much older than Rand. He's a wizard, and right now he's just been. Oh,
And
what?
Rand is what? What is Rand's is he a overeducated traveling wizard?
Yes.
And
that's-
Rand is a fighter? What is he?
Rand is right now he's like just an unskilled, like unspecified farmer, just a farm boy.
Unskilled, unspecified farmer.
Yeah.
My class.
Thank you, Drew. For those who don't know, or for maybe if this is your first Clarity episode with us, Drew, our amazing producer, who also plays Caesar in our play episodes, he's behind the scenes handling all the tech things and all of these witticisms that pop up. That's
Nice.
Yep.
I love it.
So kudos to
Yeah.
Drew.
The reason why
Okay.
I asked this is depending on who delivers the news matters, right? If a difficult conversation is delivered by someone like that doesn't have any credibility, sorry, Rand, sorry, Steve's character, you know, like unskilled, unspecified farmer, well then versus a wizard, an elf wizard who, you know, like wizard, the idea of wizard and the idea of an elf, like in the D&D world, elves have a leg up over humans.
That elven privilege.
Yes, the privilege. So being able to deliver it, I would say it's a good call that Caesar was the one who who delivered it. First of all, that's one thing. The second thing is if you don't have, you know, the prestige, so to speak, of a wizard, or you're not an elf, right? Like for those viewers out there, for those of us who are not elves, we fall into the category of let's learn what's called assertive communication. So assertive communication is being able to identify the emotion and feeling, or emotion, that's the same thing, the feeling of the other person and also yourself, and you're able to express that and about the situation rather than blaming the other person, or rather than blaming the other person. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about that. Assertive communication is all about being direct and respectful, honoring the other person's needs and your own needs, you know. So being able to express it as eloquently like that would be ideal to avoid arguments, to avoid the other person being defensive and all that stuff. Caveat though, I mean, even if you're the most assertive person in the world, you might still get a negative outcome because people are going to react how they're going to react. Yes.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And sometimes no matter how eloquent you are, you know, other people and their internal emotional worlds are outside of your control. So you can try your best, but you know, the other person might have some reaction to something, and I would say it's important to make space, you know, for that person and let them, you know, feel what they need to feel.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So delivering bad news. I feel like we talk about all types of interesting things here. But that goes on then. And now, okay, so this next clip ties into the previous one, where it's like in the previous clip, they were telling the dad, oh, we've seen your son doing this thing. He's been stealing. And now the Basant, the father, has just like, he is not happy to hear this. This is really hard for him to hear. And I thought it was interesting to see how Caesar and Rand handled that, how they responded to him in his time of emotional duress. So clip 3B, please. We don't know why it is, but I'm kind of overwhelmed right now. Are you telling me that my boy he's the one who's been stealing?
I don't think it's your boy. It's not his agency, at least. I think that he is being mind controlled by some evil creature or entity of some variety to do this. I think that his actions are somehow related to the magic that has destroyed your fields and won't allow food to grow. But I think it'd be really helpful if we could maybe have a conversation with him. Again, I don't know how much information he's going to have because I think this is mind control, but at least he could testify. Like if he comes and confesses, that would let us know if the.
Well, I think it's also important to say we saw a bunch of kids, not just him, with those same sacks.
Yeah.
So we think that whatever is affecting it, whatever caused those monster twig creatures to attack us, is affecting the children.
It could also just be like every once in a while there will be like some new fad that the kids are doing nowadays that's like really bad, like the knockout game that they had in like 2020 or 2020, the early 2000s. So maybe this is kind of like that.
Okay, first of all, I had not heard of the knockout game before this moment, so that was an interesting Google search for me. Thank you, Drew. But, oh, sorry?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, yes. Well, let's see. Knockout game. Tell me more. So, I don't know. It feels weird to be talking about this during a Clarity episode, talking about all types of potential issues that people have. But basically, it's where people would walk up to total strangers and punch them and try to render them unconscious. And it was like prank, I guess. Okay. But yeah, it was, I guess, like people thought it was pranking, but I feel like we could have a whole conversation about malicious pranks and like, you know, reading into people who hurt other people for fun. Anyways, that was not, I mean, if you want to say something about that, you can, but that was not my primary focus here.
Okay. Continue.
Okay, cool. So here, I thought it was cool just to see like how when Basant said, I'm overwhelmed by this news. Yeah. Clearly he's struggling to process what's going on. Like maybe his whole paradigm of his son is now being shattered. Like he viewed his son as this wonderful, lovely boy. And so I thought it was cool to see how Caesar and Rand, they kind of immediately jumped in. And I thought they were doing a great job of helping to kind of reprocess the news and show Basant that there are different ways to process this information. There are different potential explanations. And I thought it was kind of a lovely example of how a community can support somebody who's going through a difficult time. Hopefully, like, you know, try to mitigate some trauma by helping them to process bad events in a different way. But I would really love to hear your thoughts. Yeah, anything that you'd like to share, any thoughts you had.
Basant was actually pretty calm. Okay, if somebody told me that my son, you know, has been compromised, basically, I wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm overwhelmed right now." I would be like, "What the hell?" You know. I would react overwhelmed, not like I'm overwhelmed. Like that's very. I would say, I don't know. He's emotionally, I don't know how to explain it.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe it's like a little over intellectualized instead of.
Intellectualized. Yeah, there you go.
Mm,
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it almost feels like it happened before.
Right.
Like,
So.
oh, oh man, it happened again, kind of thing.
Right. Or maybe like, is it possible that if people are going through a lot of difficult situations or like something really difficult has happened for them and then they encounter another difficult situation, is it possible that their emotions might be like muted in a way, like if you have finite emotional energy and you're just drained thinking about this one thing?
Um, it's possible
Mm.
they wouldn't be able to identify that they're overwhelmed though. They just go, I need to sit down or something like that.
Right.
Because the thing is, when somebody is delivering really difficult topics or difficult news about someone they love, someone they care about, it activates something in their brain. Um, it's like it's a sense of alarm, right? So there's let's take a trip in our brain. So our brains, this part is the prefrontal cortex. It's in charge of the like being able to identify, express what we're saying, right? Like make the decision making, right? So saying I'm overwhelmed, this is the intellectual part. When we're activated, when we're actually overwhelmed or angry or whatever, that part is the amygdala. The amygdala is the one in charge of our emotions. And the thing is, it's a one-way communication thing. So if the amygdala detects that the environment isn't safe or what you're saying to me isn't safe, then it sends the signal to your frontal cortex to shut down,
Uh-huh.
because it's not about intellectualizing the situation, it's about surviving.
Right.
So then it narrows down our decisions to, are we going to fight, are we going to flee, or are we going to freeze? So that's why when we're in, really like intense situations, whether your boss shouts at you at work or there's a tiger running after you, right? Or whatever. It's you're either you have a sense of clarity and you're running for your life, or you like suddenly you're pumped with adrenaline to fight, right? So that's what I'm that's my take on it.
Yo, that's
It's yeah, it's more of behavior. Your behaviors become more intense or you're more alert because of your emotions. You're operating on your emotions now. That's why, when we're coming out of anger or if we're coming out of intense sadness, you tend to go, I wouldn't have done that. Or like, man, like I don't know what I said. I can't believe I said that, or I can't believe I did that.
wow.
You
Yeah.
know,
Oh
it's
yeah.
because our frontal cortex is shut down. Our decision making is shut down. We lose the ability to make the proper decisions other than to survive. Like at this point, our point is to like survive.
Right. Wow, that's so real. And like I feel like everyone can relate a little bit to that idea of just like being in survival mode.
Yeah,
And at some point you snap out of it when you can finally relax again and you look back and you're like, "What? What even just happened?"
yeah.
So, yeah,
So
it's such a cool way to look at it as like a conversation between different parts of the brain and then one part gets shut down if this other part is overwhelmed.
yeah, so you don't really think clearly. Technically, you think you're thinking clearly because suddenly you're pumped with adrenaline, that rush, right? But you're not thinking logically. You're thinking to survive. So the way to undo that, right, when we're overwhelmed, it's to ground yourself. So this is why it's important to know your grounding skills, your coping skills, to tell your brain to turn this part on so then you can think again. Especially when we're not being chased after a lion or a tiger or whatever it is, and we're actually we need to do the job. Right?
Right.
So what are the grounding skills that we have? We take breaks, we take mindfulness walks, we drink a cold glass of water, splash water in our face, go to the bathroom, whatever it is we need to do to reset.
Oh,
Yeah. So in this situation, right, with my son, right,
Mm.
somebody I care about, my own son, is I was just delivered the news that my son may be under the influence, right? Like mind control, being manipulated, and he may be in trouble. That to me, it'll shut down your frontal cortex. You're in fight, flight, or freeze mode. If he was in freeze mode, it would be like, I'm gonna sit down. So there's a lot to process right now.
Right.
And then and he may be quiet, right? Or like what you were describing as subdued. I would see it that way. Or maybe if he's like, I don't want to hear this right now, go away. That to me, that's fleeing, a fleeing response. Or fight response would be like, where is he? Let's go, or
I'm sure that boy, but yeah.
or anger, like the anger, like beating the messenger, so to speak. Like,
Yeah.
my son would never do that, blah, 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 right?
Mhm.
Whatever it is, it's reacting with emotion.
Yes. Yeah. A lot of the time I feel like we can almost feel the difference between like our thinking brain and our feeling brain.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like one of them just clicks off. Usually it's the thinking brain. So yeah, I guess then this also makes me think about like situations where people for some reason or another maybe feel numb. And I think I've like had a few friends in my life, and I've experienced this myself in the past, where there will just be a time period where like you're trying, and like that your feelings are in there somewhere, but you just feel so detached, and there's just like that numbness inside. And yeah, that almost feels like the opposite of what we know logically happens in terms of like the amygdala and just the natural human response to feel emotions. So if somebody is feeling numb and they're like, oh, I don't have like the appropriate emotional reactions to these scenarios in my life, I don't know, what do you think? Could we offer something?
If somebody goes to therapy and tells me that they have trouble accessing their emotions, that to me means that their amygdala has been activated so many times that they've gotten used to it, that they've become, because the alarm system in our brain in their brain constantly shuts off the frontal lobe over and over and over and over again. And it's like you're always in survival mode. Think about like always being in survival mode.
You just get desensitized. Right.
You get exhausted. It's exhausting to always be in survival mode. But then sometimes life becomes so hard that you really have no choice. So then, because you want to keep surviving, because it's not good to always have adrenaline in your veins.
Oh yeah.
So your body adapts. It cuts off the feeling and like your body and your brain. So then the experience then becomes a dissociation. So this is what happens when you constantly have to endure the trauma, right? Bad things happen to you over and over again, then nothing seems to faze you.
Yeah. Wow.
That's years of therapy. Well, I don't know about years, but maybe depending on how motivated you are to change that, right? Therapy is important for people like that because they need to reattach that, because feeling things is really important, because then that's how you connect with relationships. That's how you build relationships. You can't have a relationship if there's no feeling involved.
Of course, yeah, that's the basis of connection.
Yeah.
I really love what you said, and thank you for explaining that so beautifully and thoroughly. Because I think, especially like recently, there have been a lot of really stressed out people who've gone through a lot of difficult things, and I see more and more people who are like, "Oh, I've been through it all. Like I've seen so much. It doesn't even faze me anymore," like you were saying, or like, "Oh, it doesn't bother me anymore."
Yeah.
And a lot of people will say like, "Oh, whatever. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's fine," and they'll kind of like push the emotional world to the side.
Yeah, trauma is like an open wound that keeps being reopened over and over again, and then over time you develop, what do you call it? I forgot.
Scab,
Not well,
callus.
callus. You develop calluses, emotional calluses, and that's what explains the numbness because you've been burned so many times that just develop this tough skin.
Right, right.
So tough that yes, you're protected by the outside world, but then nobody comes in.
Hmm.
So the chances are those people who have all these calluses, it's hard for them to connect with people because nobody can pass through their calluses.
Right, right. And I feel like I just want to like give a shout out to those people who are doing their best to get by, but may have a lot of these emotional calluses that stop them from being able to feel their feels and make meaningful connections. And if that resonates with you out there in the world, then know that it doesn't have to be that way. There are resources out there and professionals like our wonderful Kim who can help you kind of process that and move through that and find yourself in a healthier place.
Yeah.
That's what anyone would want for you. You deserve it. All right. Wow. It's beautiful. Such gems, such pearls of wisdom every time we do one of these. Thank you for being you, Kim. Okay, let's see. We're 30 minutes in. Okay, I wanted to also talk about, now we're going to continue kind of exploring this dynamic between Caesar, Rand, and Basant. And what happens is Basant basically like invites them back to his place, and he says, "Oh, we need to talk to my boy who's been stealing. But I don't know where he is right now. He's out with friends somewhere. He'll probably be back home later. So if you want, you can come wait at my place, and then we'll kind of catch him when he gets home." So in this next clip, Caesar and Rand are kind of like planning out, well, okay, how are we going to confront this boy? What are we going to do? What are we going to say? So can we get clip number 4, please?
Yeah.
All right.
Maybe
So-
we can discuss what the best way of like talking to this kid. I mean, do we take the direct approach, or do we try to like get down to his level and say, hey, like you've been eating those bugs, like you feeling funny or anything like that? Or
I think it'd be good to ask if he's noticed any changes. Well, first we should see if he like recognizes this as something he's done, if he takes responsibility. If we can figure that out first.
I'll be interested in seeing his reaction upon seeing us.
Yeah. Like if he recognizes us, then we got some stuff to talk about. Like if he goes into a fugue state when this happens, like wakes up and is like, "Where am I?" That'll also be interesting to see, but we'll get something of an answer out of that, I think.
Rand looks at you and say, "A fug state? What's a fug state?"
It's this whole thing where like you're doing stuff and you're awake and you're doing stuff, but you're not aware of what you're doing and you don't remember it later.
Wow, man.
It happens sometimes, and people, when stuff gets really crazy, it happens sometimes.
You elves are really smart.
Yeah, not all of us, but if you spend a lot of time in the academy, you kind of.
So that was cool. I like that Dru kind of brought up the fugue state, which I think like in terms of the world of psychology. I think it's a pretty fascinating phenomenon. When that actually happens, I'm so curious. So I guess first, could you flesh out for our audience, like, what is the fugue state?
Well, the way you described it, I was thinking more like dissociation. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Okay, all right.
About dissociation a while ago.
Right. It's like our brains are primed for dissociation now.
Yeah.
I guess like I think it was Breaking Bad, where I believe there was a part of the Breaking Bad arc, and I don't know, should I avoid spoilers, because like it's such an old show at this point. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't know what to tell you, but I mean, okay, so there's a part in the greater arc of Breaking Bad where Walter White, he like is trying to evade law enforcement, and basically like he goes to a place far away. Yes. Okay. Well, I was still gonna try to avoid the spoilers, but whatever. So, okay, he goes to a place super far away from his home, and he just like shows up one day in a shop, and he's like stripped down to his underwear, and he's just standing there like acting like he's in a daze. It's like, what? Where am I? What is this? Who am I? And for me, like when I think of fugue state, I think of that, like somebody just losing their memory just temporarily.
Because they dissociated.
Right. That's fair.
I mean, commonly, it impacts fugue state. Like when we talk about that, it impacts memory, right? And that's because your brain and your body are disconnected in a way. I think it's hard to not talk about dissociative identity disorder, DID, because that's when, like, you don't know what your other person, like your other personality, is doing when, and that causes memory lapses, right? Blackouts, as other people, like describe it. And in social media, not social media, just in the media in general, they really love talking about DID.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so fascinating to people.
I feel like that's kind of a blessing and a curse, because like there's so much discourse about it in pop culture, but a lot of that is inaccurate, or like it kind of gives people the wrong idea about what DID actually is.
Yeah, that's true. It does give people the wrong idea sometimes, because it's used as like a story tool in media. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. For people who have DID, it's not always a Jekyll and Hyde situation.
Yeah.
It's super interesting. Talking about interesting psychological phenomena.
So you also see like lapses in memory with trauma cases, right? Like if you've experienced, this is why we dissociate. Like there's an experience that's so severe that you escape. You try to escape, right? Your brain wants you to escape to protect yourself. But like our brains are really clever in which they try to adapt with what we are experiencing, right? So let's see. The latest DID like situation in media is Moon Knight. I don't know if people watch it. Moon Knight is a Marvel TV show in Disney Plus, and it's really a story about a character that has DID. A superhero. An anti-hero? No, I don't know. And he went through trauma. Like that's what gave birth to the other personality. So, I don't know what I was going for with that. I'm basically saying the same thing over and over.
That's okay. Repetition is fantastic. Um, yeah, yeah. Especially, I think if people are, not very informed about the field of psychology and they're here just kind of like casually listening and learning whatever they can, then I think it's always helpful to say things in different ways, so everyone can catch the meaning.
It's important to recognize that there's a spectrum of dissociation, because when we think of people who dissociate, we automatically go to like what we just did with the ID and all that stuff. But a very, very mild form of dissociation, just to give people an idea on what that even feels like, the people who
Mhm.
don't know what that is, or like I can't relate, just so to give you an idea to that you can relate to it. It's when you're daydreaming, right? Your mind goes elsewhere, and then you're like, I'm sorry, what was that? I totally was not listening to what you were saying. Like your mind drifts, right? Like that's a super, super, super mild form of dissociation. We dissociate by daydreaming. Like it's
Wow.
very, it's that's what makes it relatable.
Right,
When
right.
it's maladaptive or whatever, right? When it becomes a disorder, right? It, we dissociate to an extreme, such an extreme case that it's there's a purpose in order to protect ourselves from what is happening in front of us. So we daydream so much. No, I don't want to put it that way, but it's just the trauma is so severe that your brain wants to protect yourself from what's happening.
Right, right. Absolutely.
By getting by fragmenting yourself, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I can relate. I had a very difficult childhood, and I remember spending a lot of time as a kid just kind of daydreaming, or sitting around just kind of imagining what life could be, imagining myself in a different life, or
Yeah,
like, yeah. And I think that, yeah, of course, back in the day, I didn't have the vocabulary to know that I was dissociating. But I think that kind of gives, like, naming the thing that is happening. It gives us power, it gives us agency, and it gives us the ability to actually kind of take an informed stance on our internal experience, and then figuring out what next steps are to get help for ourselves if needed.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Wow. I love it. Okay, so now we're getting to our last couple of clips that I've prepared for today. And while we are here at Basant's house, Caesar and Rand, waiting for this boy to show up. Where is this boy? Who knows? It's just out there in the world somewhere. And Basant seems to kind of be struggling a little bit. They notice like his kitchen is just a mess, like dirty dishes stacked all over the place. He seems like he's on the verge of tears while they're talking. So at one point he like just goes into his room, to put the baby to sleep. That's what it was. He doesn't come out for a while. So Caesar and Rand, being the nice boys, the kind boys that they are, they're like in the kitchen doing the dishes for this guy. They're like, "Oh, you want to do the dishes? Okay, let's do the dishes. Let's help him out." They're doing the dishes. And a while passes. So Caesar says, "You know what? I'm going to go check on Basant. Like, I want to see what's up. I'm going to go check in on him." So clip number 5 shows Caesar approaching Basant. Open.
Let me close this back door.
I'm gonna kind of do one of these standing in the doorways, being like, "Hey, knock, knock. Hey, you doing okay? What's going on, man?"
Yeah. So, all right. And when you call out to him, he just like he startles. He's curled up in bed and he's facing away from you with the blankets over him, and he startles a bit. And he looks over. Liana, and And as you're looking around in the space, you notice that this room is like very cluttered. There's dirty clothes all over the place. In the corners of the room, you see like broken wine bottles. And he's just in bed, like, and he's looking over at you, Liana. And then he like shakes himself. And he's oh, sorry, I must have dozed off.
All you're good, man. All good. Heard you sound like you were having a rough time earlier. Just wanted to see if you're okay.
Your son hasn't come home yet. It's getting darker out.
Oh, I don't know what's going on anymore. Thanks for checking in on me, man.
Of course.
And he comes over and he says, all right, let's sorry about that. Let's go back out there.
No need to be sorry, dude. It's a human thing. That's what we're all up to.
So here I just wanted to highlight, well, Basant is struggling, but I also really loved the line that Dru said, where Caesar, he looks at Basant and he says, it's okay. It's a human thing. It's what we're all up to. I felt like that was such a beautiful moment of empathy. And yeah, I don't know. So the struggle and then the empathy and just the glorious humanness of it all. What are your thoughts, Kim?
He was being really empathetic for him and helping him and supporting him in this time, in this trying time in the son's life, right? And generally, when there's nothing to change and nothing to adapt, all that's left is to bear witness to somebody else's pain by showing your empathy and all that stuff, right, for the other person. So for those of us who see another person struggling, especially our loved ones, it's really hard to see them like that, and our helping reflex tends to be pushed, right? Like we want to do everything to help them, to fix quote unquote them, right? Figure out what's wrong, what's the solution here, when sometimes people really just need to be seen. Their feelings need to be seen and heard.
Oh my gosh,
So
yes.
that, I think we talked about this before in a different Clarity episode. I'm going to reference it again. In the movie Inside Out, when the child Riley ran away, actually the entire movie was spent with her primary emotion, joy, wanting her, Riley, to be happy over and over again, and rejecting sadness, right? Forcing sadness away, not wanting to feel the bad feelings. So, over time, she became numb. Riley became numb. Like the entire control board just became black, right? And she ran away. And it was sadness that was able to remove the idea of running away from her family. Like that's really indicative of how to deal with difficult feelings, right? It's not to push them away or force them away. It's to recognize them. It's to validate that it's there rather than keeping them at bay. So, how Riley handled that whole situation is she was honest to her family, and she started crying, and she said, I just wanted, you guys to be happy, blah, blah, blah. And she was consumed with sadness at the end of that movie, right? And because she was so sad, she was given the support she needed, the love she craved from her family, right? And then that memory became happy and sad at the same time at the end of that movie. So it's a really good representation. I really love that movie. It's an amazing representation of what to do when you're experiencing strong emotions, like grief, right? Or like just an intense pain.
Sure.
You feel it.
Yeah.
That's how you get through it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. The only way out is through.
Mhm.
And I really love that you said, like, it's just so beautiful. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a person is to bear witness to them, what they're going through. And like, it's so conditioned in us to try to fix everything. But when it comes to the complexities of the inner world, it's not it's not something you can just slap some duct tape on and call it a day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what makes things complicated.
Mm-hmm. Yup.
For those of us who are just like, well, what does that do? Right? Like, I don't understand. Like, I'm not really doing anything. I'm just sitting here listening. Sometimes that's enough. You're if you're looking for a purpose of the listening, you're coaxing the feeling out, right? You're coaxing the shy, difficult emotion out. You're extracting it with kindness by listening.
Yeah. Yeah. A little kindness goes such a long way. Oh. So wholesome. So I actually, yes. So in terms of grieving, I wanted to kind of jump into our final clip of the day. And I do kind of want to give a warning to the people out there who are watching. This involves loss. This involves the passing of a loved one. And it shows kind of Basant processing what has happened to him, what has happened in his life that has caused him a lot of duress. So, that being said, can we please get our final clip of the day, clip number 6? So, you see that picture over there? And he points at a painting that's on the wall here. And the painting, when you look at it, you see that it depicts a portrait of a family. And you immediately recognize Basant and Kanan. And the two of them are kind of gathered around a woman who's seated in a chair. And she's fair, she's beautiful, she's got green eyes. And she's wearing a dress that's draped over her curves. She's got like a soft kind of essence to her. And one of her hands is resting on Kanan's shoulder, and the other hand is gently resting on a slight roundness to her belly. All three of them are smiling, and this woman has like a glow to her. And Basant says, well, that's her. That's Liana. My dear Liana, the most beautiful soul I ever knew. And you see how she's so gently holding herself? Well, that's Soma. Soma before we knew it was Soma. And the terrible day that Liana left us was also the beautiful day that Soma came into the world. And I'll never forget that day. She labored all day. It started, Soma decided that she wanted to be an early bird, but it was difficult. And poor Liana, she labored all day. And after, I don't know how many hours, we went to get a midwife. And luckily, we were able to find someone, a trained midwife from Waterdeep, So we brought this midwife back to help us. And poor Liana, she closed herself away in this room, and she forbade myself and Kanan from going in. She said, no, I got this. And poor girl, her screams, her cries just filled the house. I thought I was going crazy listening to that. But as the hours passed, she got quieter and quieter. And in sometime in the middle of the night, I remember so clearly the moonlight filtering in through the windows. Something to soothe the anxious, tense air in the house, right? Suddenly, there was just silence. And I thought maybe this is it, maybe it's done now. But I couldn't hear a baby, like I couldn't hear any crying. And I remember Kanan came into the world screaming, he was ready to fight that boy. And so I wondered why it was all silent. And a couple moments passed, and then I heard a baby's cry. Very weak, but a baby's cry. So, at that point I was like, oh, finally it's over. And I burst into the room. And the midwife was there holding this beautiful little girl, this very, very thin, frail little child. And I knew I had to protect her with everything that I had. And I looked over at Liana, and I wanted to say, hey, congratulations, we did it. But she was so still. And no matter how many times I called her name, she wouldn't get up. So that was the day that I lost Liana. And that was the day that Soma came into the world. So that was a little bit of a longer clip. But I wanted to convey the whole story there. Because this was like a heavy moment. And I think this is the first time within the plot of Dungeons and Wellness that we've dealt with loss in such a significant way, and grief and grieving. And I imagined Basant as just somebody who needed to grieve, but perhaps was not processing or not allowing himself the space to feel everything he needed to feel, hence like the dissociation and the numbness that we talked about earlier. But yeah, I guess I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit. I think especially because in this current day and age that we are in, I think grief in some form is something that a lot of people are dealing with. Yeah, so I guess, did this scene trigger any thoughts for you, or do you have any words of advice for people who are currently processing grief in their own way? What do you think?
Well, it's interesting because we tend to talk about what so we tend to talk about it in the clip previously. It's interesting. Yeah, it's really what we talked about last time, a few minutes ago, in terms of grief and the feeling of grief, something like a strong emotion, right? It's important to address it and acknowledge it and feel it. And that's really how we move forward. Like acknowledging that it happened and bearing the pain for them and remembering them, kind of thing, like remembering them fondly. Being as close to your other loved ones as possible would be great. Lots of self-care. Yeah, not to be afraid of the pain, because grief is love lost, right? You don't grieve for somebody you don't care about. You grieve for somebody that you love. So for those of us who are wondering why this happened to them, or wondering why it's especially hard for them, well, that's just a testament to how much you love them and care about them while they were still with us. So the stronger you grieve, that means the more you cared about them. So blaming yourself or being hard on yourself for grieving too much, it translates to being hard on yourself for loving someone that hard.
Oh,
So
wow.
if we think about it that way, like, how could you get mad at that? How can you get mad at yourself that way, you know? It's a final gift for the person you lost.
Poetry. Oh, like actually, I love that. So beautiful. It's a final gift for the loved one that you lost.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's just so important in the process of grief to, like really make space and just like recognize how strong that connection was. And instead of focusing on just moving on,
Mhm.
like really honor that connection that you had.
Yeah.
Find a way. I think there are a lot of people who I think process their human experience through like creative pursuits, visual arts or music. You're a burgeoning music producer yourself, and I think there's so many forms of expression that can help people kind of process and also like do right by them and the love that they had. And I think that's such an important part of the grieving process that we all go through.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that grieving is something that is universal. Like at some point, inevitably, we all encounter just like grief. Whether it's, like in this example, it's the loss of a loved one, or it could even be, and this was interesting for me to think about when I first encountered this idea, but it could also be like grieving for a life that we wish we had. And like thinking about like instances of just personal experience, but like childhood trauma. And in my own healing process, somebody, gave me really profound advice and said, well, like make room to grieve and mourn for the childhood that you wish you had. Um, like just that which is not real, but we wish were real. And I feel like grieving and the skill, maybe what I'm trying to get at is that grieving is a skill. And we can, I guess, build that skill so that, and this is circling back to what we were talking about earlier, but building the skills so that you can feel your emotions and feel safe and process and move through it in a healthy way that doesn't end up kind of hurting yourself. I think a lot of the time grieving can end up with people harming themselves in some way or another in an attempt to get away from their emotions.
Yeah. There's also another way of looking at grief for those of us who, let's say, are trying to get over a breakup or some kind of important relationship has been severed in some way. The person doesn't really have to die, you know, for you to grieve. It's grief. The definition is really like your reaction to any change in a relationship that you hold dear. So it can be someone who, like a family member that you love, and let's see, grief process. Look, I got distracted.
Yeah, I think that's Steve. Oh, yay! It's Steve.
There we go.
A beautiful comment, Steve. Yes.
I was gonna say, totally forgot. So,
a change.
let's say there's a family member that you hold dear, and that person has a mental breakdown, and then suddenly they're not the same anymore, right? Or they had a stroke or something, right?
Sure.
They're not the person you knew anymore. Their makeup, their brain just changed drastically, where suddenly they have schizophrenia, they hear voices, everything, like things like that, or loss of your body part. You know, you got into a severe car accident, right? And then you lost your legs. Like the reaction of shock and anger and bargaining, all that stuff, that is grief. So it's important to remember that you can grieve for something that isn't dead, right? You can grieve about an idea, you can grieve about a body part, like it's something that you care about, something that you hold dear. And it's
Wow.
important to treat it that way, like to treat it as it's a powerful emotion that you have to recognize and have to acknowledge in order to move forward and be resilient from it, come out of it, you know, a better person.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. And like, I feel like there are a lot of people who go through some sort of loss. And if it's not like one of those classic, like big moments of grieving, like you said, loss of a loved one, or, you know, the end of a significant relationship, or loss of a body part, like these are big examples. But then, like you said, you can grieve for anything that you had like a strong connection to, and
Yeah.
there's like some sort of shift or change in that connection. And I think that a lot of the time, maybe sometimes people don't even really realize that they are grieving something.
Yeah.
Um,
Or if you're contemplating letting go of a relationship that you care about, but you have to let them go because it's toxic,
oh, yeah.
you know, like that tumultuous emotion of like that raging storm of like, I want to let this person go, but I can't. I don't know why, or it's hard for me to like, you're trying to get over the fact that you're going to lose this relationship forever.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Like whatever side whatever side of the relationship you are on, the loss of a significant relationship is painful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so like I think it's really beautiful to think about grieving as, you know, it's not necessarily just this terrible, awful thing that we all have to try to move through as quickly as possible and oh my God, get it over with. Like I think that grieving and grief is like, first of all, it's intrinsically a part of the human experience to grieve. And I think that it's part of what makes our human experience so profound and beautiful. And it adds to like this complexity of life and our inner world. So, yeah. So I think that, you know, grieving, it is, you know, it's difficult. But when you have somebody on your team like Kim, or you know somebody who is like a mental health professional who can help you kind of move through your phases, your stages of grief, and somebody who can really help you to understand what you're going through and understand that it's normal and okay, and somebody who can help you kind of work through that in a healthy way, then grief can actually be something where if we process it the right way, we end up stronger and we end up, you know, having learned more and kind of more able to tackle the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So grief is one of those things where it doesn't necessarily, I mean, it happens to us, but it also kind of happens for us if you look at it in a certain way. Yeah. Yeah. So lots of ways to grow and help your little soul to become stronger.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And that's why we have people like Kim who devote their lives and careers to just helping other people to kind of process this human experience and grow into hopefully the best possible version of themselves, the healthiest possible version of themselves. I really can't say it enough. Like, Kim, thank you for what you do. I'm I'm sure you're just invaluable. Your insight and what you offer to the people around you, your clients, but also like your friends. I don't know. I feel like I just benefit from your wisdom and insight all the time. And
Well, thanks.
yeah.
I try my best.
And you're killing it out here, man. You're killing
Wow.
it. So, yes, just a shout out also to other, mental health clinicians. Like, thank you for what you do. We need you. And for those of you who are looking at things like this, maybe you go on social media and you look up like, popular like therapist pages, or you look at like pop psychology and you're like, oh, this is pretty cool, this is pretty interesting. Well, like, if you are very curious about this kind of thing and you feel like maybe there's part of your own inner world that you'd like to explore more, I cannot recommend enough like finding a professional to talk to. Someone like Kim, like even as a friend, she's amazing. I can't imagine like what clients in session must benefit so much.
I hope so.
Yeah, it's just so cool to have someone there with this level of knowledge who can offer you insight and different perspectives and help you achieve those cognitive shifts and reframe your experience. So, yeah, man.
Well
Thank
said.
you for being you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah. All right. I feel like I've kind of like reached the end of what I wanted to say. Kim, is there anything else you'd like to say today with our Dungeons and Wellness fam out there in the world?
I don't know, how much time do we have?
However much time you need, lady.
I don't know. Yeah.
I agree, Steve. Kim does
God.
rock. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of like if it's worth talking about. Like, why is it do we need to suffer or something like that? I feel like because it's related to grief. It's just a long. I don't know. I don't want to take up too much time. That's all.
I will. I mean, I think a big part of like moving through grief is also learning how to make meaning of suffering. So I think that if somebody is watching this and they are going through a period of grieving in their lives, if you can offer something that helps them, like, please, the floor is yours. Like, take all the time you need. I would love to be able to help people in whatever way we can.
Okay. Well, if you think about it, we learn to appreciate things because there's a risk of us losing them. So in order for goodness to exist, this is a principle. In order for good, happiness, love, all these comfortable things, happy things, all that, those things, we must also experience suffering in order to acknowledge it. Like, how are we able to know that something is to be appreciated when we don't know what it's like to lose someone or lose something? Like, it's just that concept. Like, this is why we strive to find meaning in life, right? Because it's just our reality. It's temporary. Everything is temporary. Yes. And it's a scary concept to think about. A lot of media also talks about that by talking about someone who can live forever, right? Like, if you can live forever, usually what it boils down to is you lose sight of living. You're not really living anymore. You've lost the will to find meaning. And that's why losing something or suffering or bearing through pain exists. It's because that's how we know that something is important.
Right.
How we know that it's worth loving, worth fighting for, worth caring about, etc. You know, it's
Right.
that yin and yang thing. It's that balance. We need darkness to know that there's light.
We live in a world of dualities, and yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. You know, to make, so this is like I'm having a memory, which is like a very light analogy here. It's not nearly as heavy, but I feel like it's appropriate. I went to college in Los Angeles, and I was coming from places that were like really cold and rainy, and like New York, for example, like these long New York winters. And then I went to LA for undergrad, and part of my decision-making process was, wow, the weather is beautiful in LA. Like, I just want to be somewhere where it's sunny all the time. So I go to LA, and my roommate, my first year, is a girl who was born and raised in Southern California. And I remember talking to her one time about the weather, you know, so interesting. Wow, Michelle talks about the weather with her friends. So here I am talking about the weather with my roommate. And she said, or was it her or just somebody who like had spent their whole lives in the LA area? And they said, God, I am so bored of the sunshine. Like, I wish it would rain. I wish it would snow. Like, this is so boring. I hate this weather. I would love to go to New York or something and just like be in the winter. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, what? Dude, like I feel like I'm in paradise right now. I come from a place where there are like 6 months of darkness and snow. And dude, like, come experience a New York winter. It's rough. And so going to LA, I was like, wow, I'm like in utopia. This is amazing. I love this. And for her, like, she hadn't never really experienced anything other than that. And so she didn't recognize that her daily lived experience was somebody else's version of like paradise.
Yeah.
So
it's because you experienced the lack of it. Right? So
right.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's like. Yeah, like if you've never really, I don't know. I think we talked a lot about this already. It's that balance.
Yeah. And yes, we see both sides of the duality, and it's good. One end reminds us of the other end, vice versa, and then over time we ease into all the shades of gray in between.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
that's it. We're done.
Yeah, I feel like this was such an amazing conversation. We talked about so much. You've shared so much wisdom with us. So thank you, Kim, for your time, as always. I know you're like super busy nowadays, so I doubly appreciate you sharing your time with us. And yeah, shout out to the wellness fam out there. Thank you for joining us, whether you're joining us in person or sometime in the future. We appreciate you. Thanks for being here. The standard, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Dungeons and Wellness content. And Kim, this is me. I'm just leaning into it. You know? Oh my God. Thank you everyone for being here. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Goodbye. Goodbye.